Hi guys, and welcome to Rwanda Now and Then, which is where I go back through a diary that I kept for 2 years between 2007 and 2009 when I very first arrived in Rwanda as a volunteer sign language researcher. I still live here today, and it's just really interesting to go back through the diary and compare what is different and what's the same after almost 2 decades. So today is a very special episode because up until this point I've mostly been talking about my life in the UK, what I was doing there, the process of volunteering, what kind of prompted me to volunteer, how I joined voluntary services overseas, the training I went through pre-departure. But today we begin by getting on the plane and flying to Kigali. So if you've been following along so far, thank you for sticking with it. But today it's going to become all about Rwanda. So I'm a little bit nervous because I have to admit, I've got very strong memories of certain parts of being here as a volunteer. But there's a huge amount that I don't remember. And that was the entire point of keeping the blog, was that, one day I could look back at it and remind myself. So let's dive in. All right, guys, here we go. I hope that the audio's okay because my laptop fan has been going into overdrive recently. Maybe it's as excited as I am. Right, so where are we? We're on Saturday the 3rd of November 2007. Oh, okay. Disclaimer, all views written on this blog are my own and not necessarily representative of VSO. That is a very important disclaimer. I feel like VSO might have told us that it was okay to keep a diary, but that we probably should say something like that. Because, I was coming to a country where, freedom of speech and the rules of freedom of expression can be a bit different to where you're coming from. And I didn't want to get anybody into trouble. Right. Well, I wasn't going to write another diary like I did for Australia, but that would be stupid. It's been a long time, 3 years, since I last wrote properly, and this time I'm largely writing for me. Yeah, so I have always been a blogger. And I mentioned that I travelled around Australia for a year with a friend, and the entire time I did that, I was keeping paper diaries, so paper journals, which I really enjoyed, but they were only very good for me because my handwriting is terrible. Literally, I can't write legibly. So, when I discovered blogging, that was even better because if you're typing, you can read it again. But I kept the blog throughout Australia in the written format, which I've got at home somewhere. And my friend, he was keeping all of the emails because once a week we would find an internet cafe and we would send like an update, a diary update home to our parents so that they knew where we were and what we'd been doing. And he actually printed out all of those emails when we got home and he put them in a scrapbook. I think I've still got that somewhere as well. But of course, back then, blogs, it was difficult because internet was so bad back then that trying to upload things and trying to, find internet cafes where you could do that, it wasn't so easy. And I have to admit, it's kind of a bit of a regret that I've got, especially about when I first came to Rwanda, is that I didn't have any ability to make videos, but we'll get into that later. But, I even if I could take the videos, I couldn't have uploaded them. But the other thing I regret is I took very, very few photographs. It was a different world. It wasn't such a thing. Wait a minute. I'm on a Kenya Airways plane to Nairobi, Kenya. Well, yeah. I've been in the air for about an hour and a half. So how was I writing this? I guess I must have been writing this on a piece of paper to kind of type up later. Shrek 3 has just started. It was a really emotional goodbye at the airport. Mum, Dad, Merrick and Marilyn were there to see me off. I held it together until I boarded the plane. Then I had a little cry. I mean, yeah, it was slightly terrifying. I was 26 And although I travelled around Australia and I'd travelled a lot with my dad during the holidays to places like Greece and Portugal as a kid, I'd only ever got on a plane once on my own before, and that was to Germany. So I once did a summer camp with the British Army in Germany, and that was the first and only time I'd gotten on a plane on my own before. And, you know, like that was like an hour-long flight, maybe less than that, you know. So getting on a plane to Central Africa on my own at 26 was a little bit terrifying, and I imagine a little bit terrifying for my parents as well. But anyway, right. So I soon recovered, though. I found myself sitting next to a lovely lady called Zara, originally from Zanzibar. She married a Ugandan and now has a home in London and a home in Uganda that she travels between. One of her sons is a pilot. She also has a daughter with my name. Oh, yeah. Okay, so I made light of it in this blog because I didn't kind of want to upset my parents or anything, but I was quite terrified. You know, I don't know. I've been preparing for this for months and months and months, so I was like totally ready to go. But I don't know, I really had a little bit of a freak out, like really kind of had a bit of a cry sitting there. And I remember this lady was so kind to me. She was so kind to me. And yeah, it was just really, really random that her daughter had my name. So I think she felt a bit protective, and I was really grateful. She was just really kind of nice about it and chill. So yeah, she kind of calmed me down a lot. It was really nice just to have her here. She went to study medicine in Russia before she was married, so knows how it feels to get on a plane on her own. Yeah, well, I learned a lot about her because I think I just desperately needed something to distract me. So yeah, she was just lovely. Cassie also wrote me the most amazing letter, really touching. She told me not to open it until I was safe on the plane. One line read, "Hope you've had your first bag of aeroplane peanuts." And I had. So Cassie was my best friend throughout uni. I've talked about her before. And yeah, she wrote me this lovely, lovely letter to read. And I think that's the thing, is I just really needed something to distract me. So talking to Zara and reading that letter just kind of really, it gave me something else to focus on other than the fact that I was about to fly like thousands of miles away from home to somewhere I'd never been before on my own. She also included some wonderful photographs of us to put up on my wall, which really lifted me. Yeah, I needed that. I needed to take something with me from home. I'm tired now. Nairobi is 3 hours ahead of us. So going to watch the end of Shrek and probably try and get some shut-eye. Yeah, I guess that's correct, because it's a weird time zone issue, because Rwanda, half of the year during summer, we're 1 hour ahead of the UK, and half the year during winter, we're 2 hours ahead of the UK. And I guess, yeah, Kenya was 1 hour ahead, so I'm flying in winter, so 2 hours ahead in Rwanda and an extra one to Kenya. So yeah, I guess that's correct. Time zones, man. Who came up with this? So yeah, I watched Shrek 3 and fell asleep. I said, I didn't think Shrek 3 would be much good, but it's excellent. Merlin is a hippie Wiccan. Okay, I actually don't remember anything about that film. So yeah, I don't think I wrote about it here, but something that just really kind of blew my mind is when we landed in Nairobi, Zara was getting off there because yeah, I can't remember if she was transferring or going to see friends in Nairobi. But as we came down into Nairobi, you know, in my head, I was thinking like hot sandy savannah, like wildebeest roaming the plains kind of thing. And as we landed, it was really grey and cold and like cloudy and miserable. And this was exactly what happened when I first ever went to Australia, is I was thinking, oh, you know, like desert and kangaroos and things. And we got there and it was raining and cold. It was colder than the UK when we arrived in Australia. And it was like that. I'm like thinking, hold on a minute. This isn't what I was expecting. And I remember Zara saying, yeah, it's often like this in Nairobi. Because, you know, I didn't realise how high up Nairobi is. I mean, altitude-wise, it's higher than Rwanda, and Rwanda is higher than the tallest mountain, Ben Nevis, in the UK. So, I mean, it's high. And so, you know, the weather there can get cold and rainy and, yeah, kind of not what you imagine when you first arrive in Africa. The first of many things I wasn't expecting. VSO never prepared me for the weather. Okay, I really can't sleep. We're just over Africa now, and I'm reflecting on how the gods have been smiling today. I was still very pagan back then. I'm not pagan anymore. I'm a humanist. I was still very pagan back then. Actually, yesterday too, with the beautiful crisp autumn weather and the colour of the trees. Perfect autumn day, my favourite kind. So yes, I had a lovely last day in the UK. My dad took me to Tintern Abbey, which is this gorgeous, gorgeous old ruined abbey. I think in the Cotswolds. I talked about it in the last video. So today, on the drive to the airport, I saw a huge jaybird, which are my favourite kinds of birds. I love jaybirds. They are just beautiful. My favourite kind of bird and quite rare to see. Then there was a field of about 20 white Shetland ponies, huge hawks sitting on fence posts along the motorway, like centurions. And I also saw deer in a field. So yeah, I think I was like noticing so much about the UK as I was going to the airport because, you know, I knew it could be a couple of years before I saw it again. Just to top it off, I've looked out of the plane window at a sky full of stars and a massive shooting star went past. How unbelievably magical. I have a good feeling about this. So in the UK, I think in many parts of the world, I don't know about Rwanda actually. I don't know if Rwandans have this this superstition, but in the UK, if you see a shooting star, like a falling star, you can make a wish on it and your wish comes true. Right. Oh, and the fireworks taking off were pretty spectacular too. Little bursts of glittering colour to wish me well on my journey. Hold on a minute. What's the... of course fireworks. Of course fireworks, because we're travelling on the 3rd of November, and in the UK, the 5th of November is bonfire night. So the saying goes, remember, remember the 5th of November, gunpowder treason and plot. I know of no reason why the gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. Guy Fawkes, 'twas his intent to blow up the king and parliament. Something like 40 barrels of powder below to see old England's overthrow. Something like holla boys, God save the king, holla boys, God kill him or we kill him. I don't know. I'll put it up somewhere. But yes, if you want to know what bonfire night's all about, go and watch this video because we carry on the tradition here in Rwanda as well. It's a huge celebration in the UK every year, 5th of November, and we celebrate the burning of the Catholics, which is a wholesome family pastime. It's really hard to explain if you're not from the UK. To be fair, it's really hard to explain if you are from the UK. But yeah, so it was almost bonfire night. So as we were taking off from London, there were all of these fireworks going off across the city. So very pretty. Okay, so yeah, I was definitely feeling a little bit shaken that, you know, I'd been preparing for this, but preparing for something and then meeting the reality of it can sometimes be a little bit different. So I was a little bit shaky. Zara was phenomenal. I've never heard from her again. I don't know where she is in the world, but thank you, Zara, thank you. And yeah, and thank you to Cassie for having sent me off with a little note and some photographs. So yeah, I was on my way. What comes next? Sunday the 4th of November 2007. Rwanda from the air. So I've borrowed that picture from somebody because, like I say, you know, you weren't taking photographs back then. And I don't think I would have had a camera that could have from that distance. GMT +3 Kenyan time. Hello and welcome to Nairobi. I saw my first African sunrise coming into land. A bed of the thickest, whitest cloud I've ever seen carpeted our descent. Mount Kenya rose above it, illuminated in red sunrise. Breathtaking. Couldn't stop giggling after we landed. Yeah, I was on a bit of a rush. Zara and I have gone our separate ways. I made a beeline for the nearest toilet, which was quite an experience. It's a toilet basin in the ground! Exclamation mark! I'd never seen one before. I am sure there's got to be a technique to it. We'll ask when I get to Kigali. For now, I just removed everything that might get sprinkled. I'd never used a squat toilet before. I'd never seen one before. However, it shouldn't have been that much of a surprise because, I used to spend a lot of time in stone circles and kind of out in the wild. And more than once or twice, I have dug a little latrine in the woods before and used that. So, I have squatted to pee before. That was definitely something I'd done. I'd just never seen an actual toilet designed for that before. Because in the UK, all toilets in houses are sit-down toilets. So I it sounds so stupid, it does, but I mean, it shouldn't have been that much of a challenge. But I was really worried because I knew that I had to get onto another flight after this. And if I misjudged it and I accidentally peed on my leg or, my jeans, then I'd have to sit on a plane next to a complete stranger smelling of wee. And I just thought, I don't know what to do here. So just to be safe, I removed everything from the waist down. I used the toilet and then I put everything back on again. It was a very British way of dealing with the situation. It was actually really foggy on landing. Typical Nairobi, Zara assured me. Seems to be burning off pretty quickly though. Yeah, so we arrived and there was fog and it was grey. And then, as the day heated up a little bit, all of that mist just disappeared and then we got the African sunshine coming through. I've wandered aimlessly to the transit lounge, but all the boards are blank. So all of the arrival, the departure boards, there was nothing on anything, like no information. So, no idea where my connection goes from, but I have 6 hours to find it. I mean, for years, this was a problem. I haven't flown with Kenya for years now because Rwanda, our national airline, goes direct to London Heathrow, so I don't need to go via Nairobi anymore. But it always used to be that, you'd spend, 7, maybe 8 hours on a plane, you get to Nairobi, and then it's only 1 hour from Nairobi to Kigali, but you'd have to wait there for 6-7 hours just like doing nothing until there was a plane that could bring you. It made a long journey that much longer. 6 hours of doing nothing in Nairobi airport. And not being funny, but back then there really wasn't much in Nairobi airport to do. So in amongst the various shops, I passed a little room with shoes outside. I guess a Muslim haven, as there were men inside sitting on the floor with incense. Yeah, I remember that. There's like a little prayer room in Nairobi airport. I don't know if they do this in, I think they maybe have this now in Western airports. I'm not too sure. But there was a little room where people could go and pray whilst they waited. Crikey, only 7 hours from London. Bit shell-shocked. I guess food and a working departure board. So, I had my priorities straight. Feed myself, find the departure information. A little bit later, I am watching the oddest thing. I found a cafe where I bought a bottle of water and found a booth I can lie down in for a nap. But there's a TV with 3 white men doing a Mr. Motivator style workout with a sign behind them saying body and spirit. What's odd is that the radio is playing some sort of God channel, a major sermon going on. And for a while, through my overtired state, I thought they were working out to the sermon. 2 separate programs though, I think. So yeah, if you don't know, Mr. Motivator in the UK, he was an exercise guy on TV. I don't think he was as far back as the 80s, but definitely in the 90s, you could tune in to watch him and just kind of like exercise along with Mr. Motivator. He was pretty hyper. So yeah, you've got two guys on TV doing that, and then you've got sort of a Bible sermon going on. I was like, love thy neighbour, love thy neighbour. God is good. God is good. And I thought that they were exercising to the sermon. But yeah, I don't know. I don't remember any of this now, but it's kind of funny looking back because, these are the things that I noticed. I'm sure there was a lot of stuff going on around me, but it's funny the things that you think it's worth writing down. A little bit later, second time peeing in a hole. Think I'm getting the hang of this. Got some kip on the sofa, exploring the airport now, quite substantial power cuts. Right, so if you don't know Britishism, a kip is just a nap. If you're having a nap, you're having a kip. So exploring the airport now, quite substantial power cuts. Yeah, I think every now and again, like you just hear this like woof and all of the power would go out, all the lights would go off, and then like maybe the generator would kick in. So yeah, I mean, power cuts are not something that you generally get in the UK unless there's a really big storm, because we're a tiny island in the middle of the sea. And we can get some pretty serious storms sometimes, and that can knock out the power occasionally, but it's rare, it's very rare. Whereas, definitely in Africa, power cuts are regular. Even today. So yeah, interesting. 4:00 p.m. Rwandan time. After what seemed like a lifetime at Nairobi airport, about 6 hours, then an hour's delay standing on the runway, finally got back in the air with a new friend. Alex Henderson, a law student from Glasgow, but he'd studied his law MA in America. He's over here working in the field of human rights law, specifically land ownership, which isn't a well-documented area in Rwanda. They want to develop it so that people can own their homes and land and not have it taken away through corruption or war. He's here until May, but going home for Christmas. Amanda, Disability Programme Coordinator, met me at the airport. Had to queue for an age to get through immigration, but lovely airport, nicer than Nairobi. Yeah, Nairobi really wasn't a great airport back then. I don't know if it's changed, but all I remember about Nairobi airport is just like rows and rows of the most uncomfortable metal airport seats you can imagine. Like there was nowhere to lie down. You're there for 6 hours and there's nowhere comfortable to sit. Introducing Amanda. Amanda was my boss at VSO, Disability Programme Coordinator Amanda, and to this day I have got such fond memories of Amanda. She's truly wonderful. And usually you'd be arriving with a group of other VSOs, and you'd all go off to your in-country training. But because I had stayed in the UK to finish my master's degree, I was coming out of sync with everybody else. So I was on my own, which was unusual. And Amanda turned up at the airport to pick me up. The scenery is so different too. Kenya was very dry and flat. Rwanda is hilly and very green, with patchwork diamond-shaped fields and big plantations. It was really cloudy on the descent, white from 35,000 feet to just above touchdown. Still to this day, I love flying into Rwanda. When you look down, it is just that. It's a patchwork of little rice paddies and fields and banana groves. It's like a blanket. It's beautiful. I was worried they would stop me at immigration for not having a working visa in my passport. VSO gave me a letter to display in just such an eventuality, but the guy just wanted to know how my lip piercing was attached. Some of the other immigration staff came to see. We laughed and I was waved through. This is one of my funniest memories. This was my first experience of arriving in Rwanda. So back then, I have to explain, back then I looked a bit different. I had an eyebrow piercing and a labret. And I got those probably around the age of 18 or 19, probably 19 when I was at university the first time around. And then when I left university, I took them out because I was working in an office. And back then, and even today, if you've got visible piercings or tattoos, I don't have any tattoos, but you know, some employers are not so happy about that. So I took them out. And once you take them out, that's it. You're not getting them back in again. And then when I went off around Australia for that year, I decided that I missed them. And we went to a piercing place in, I don't know, I think it might have been Fremantle or somewhere like that. And the lady, she did them both at the same time. So she put the eyebrow back in and the labret. And it was quite funny because she said, I've never done 2 piercings at the same time. And then took photographs afterwards. Yeah, but that was my first experience of Rwanda. Is we landed and I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be like really hardcore. You know, there's going to be people there, you know, with guns, I don't know, military uniforms. I was expecting like a very serious country where they were going to check my ID and they were going to scrutinize it and they were going to like scrutinize me and they were going to make sure that I, you know, was who I said I was and that I, you know, had all the right paperwork and my letter of admittance. They didn't even check the passport. Literally, the guy took one look at me and he just did this. He went, and I was like, what? He went, he wanted to see how the labret was attached to my lip. And so I did that. I just like turned it over because it's just a little metal disc behind that keeps it in. And I just did that and he was like, oh, and he called and about 3 other people came over to have a look. And then we just laughed about it and he just waved me through. I was like, okay. he didn't even want to know who I was, which I thought was pretty sweet. It took the fear out of everything at that point. It was like, oh, cool, you know, because definitely back then, I don't think there were many people in Rwanda with piercings. I don't think there aren't really today anyway, but yeah, definitely back then it was unusual. Amanda was really nice and insisted on giving me a hug despite my warning that I was sweaty and stinky. But at least I didn't have wee on my jeans. Oh, no, Amanda was just brilliant. She's just brilliant. Oh, yeah. Well, I don't think any of us would have survived without Amanda. She was just a stellar human being. She drove me through Kigali to my residence at the training centre. Kigali bustles with people. Really is another world. Women with baskets of fruit on their heads and babies on their back. Saw a few amputees, which acted as a stark reminder of the genocide. Saw a young man missing an arm. Yeah, my overriding memory of that first ride out of the airport was just seeing a woman. She was wearing a kitenge skirt and just a big basket of fruit on her head, because I'd never seen anybody carrying something on their head before. I mean, I guess maybe I saw it on documentaries on TV about Africa before, but I'd never actually seen. I think I thought it was a stereotype. You know, I thought maybe it was, I don't know what I thought, but I'd just never seen it before. And I sort of like, my head just whipped round. I was like, whoa. Yeah, just fascinating to see people carrying so much on their heads. Yeah, the amputee part is interesting. We'll talk about that we'll talk about that later on. The apartment is fantastic. Really big room and ensuite. Best of all, sit-down toilets. The shower takes a bit of work, sort of half shower, half bucket, but means I can wash my clothes at the same time. So yeah, when I arrived, just to explain again, because I was a pain in the ass and I didn't arrive with everybody else had already been through one session of in-country training. So before I flew out, I went to Harborne Hall 3 times for pre-departure training. And when I arrived, I was supposed to have 2 sessions of in-country training. So one when you first arrive and one, I think it was maybe a month or so later. So I was joining the second in-country training. I didn't know anybody, but everybody already knew each other. And so it was quite a thing to be sort of flung into this as my first arrival experience. But it was good. I'll tell you about it. So the apartment, oh God, I've forgotten the name. I want to say it was a Marnie guest house. And I want to say it was very close to where Sonotubes used to be. Hi guys, editing me jumping in here, but just to let you know, the place was called Centre Armani and it's still there today. So I think we might have to hop on the bike and take a trip down memory lane at some point. Sorry, my brain is kind of racing to catch up with this because it was so long ago. Vegetarianism has pretty much gone out the window. The vegetable dishes are lovely, but I want to try a bit of everything. One youth for development worker who has been here a month says she's survived as a veggie, so long as you don't mind eating chips and salad regularly. I ain't doing that for 2 years. So growing up, I was vegetarian till I was about 21. And then at university, I met somebody and they were entirely carnivorous and wouldn't touch anything green. And so around 21, I thought, well, sod it. And I started to eat meat for the first time. And I was trying everything. And when our relationship ended, I had become a carnivore. I had become a meat eater. And my partner at the time had become a vegan. Figure that one out. But round about this time I had pretty much gone back to vegetarianism again, but I made a very definite decision that when I came to Africa, I knew it was going to be difficult. I knew the adjustment was going to be extreme. I knew there was going to be a lot to kind of adapt to and I would be in many stressful situations. And I just thought to myself that I wasn't going to make what I ate an additional stress. You know, I kind of just thought, well, you know, in an ideal world, maybe I'd go back to vegetarianism, but given everything else I'm going to have to cope with, food is not going to be a stressor for me. I'm going to eat whatever is put in front of me. So yeah, just for me, it kind of took one more stress off the table. And everybody deals with it in a different way. Just relaxing now. 18 other volunteers will be arriving from around Rwanda for a meal tonight, an in-house training. So, should be fun. I've already met a few. All YFD but lovely people, good sense of humour and seem to know their way around. So YFD stands for Youth for Development. So Voluntary Services Overseas, VSO, had 2 programmes. They had adult professionals, which I joined, and they had Youth for Development, who I think they came for 1 year. I can't remember. Usual placements for adults were 2 years. I think Youth for Development, it was more kind of designed as a gap year experience. So I think they were, I don't know what the age range was anymore. VSO youth programs. Okay, I'm struggling to find the exact information, but I think it was from 18 to 25 was the YFD program. Oh, electricity here is temperamental. It's the short wet season and, like Nairobi, prone to sudden outages. Had one while preparing for a shower. Yeah, still an issue today, to be honest. Not as bad as it used to be back then. Definitely not as bad as it used to be, but I've talked about this in previous videos. We're having some temperamental electricity issues at the moment. Just returned from dinner. Was a bit much after such a long day. Wasn't sure where the dining area was, so followed the voices. Was quite tough because everyone already knew each other really well. They've all been on training together before. Also, a high proportion of French speakers, so that's another language to add to the list. Wasn't easy to get involved. Never mind, probably a bit overtired too. Yeah, I was knackered, you know. I just flown halfway across the world, emotionally exhausted from saying goodbye to my family and everybody. But back then, definitely 100%, Rwanda was pretty francophone. And so there were a lot of French-speaking volunteers as well. That has changed very, very dramatically over the years. There's been a huge push, a huge shift towards English. But still, a lot of people here speak French. Although, to be fair, I never really learnt much of it. During COVID, I did Duolingo for a while, but my French sucks. My ability to learn spoken languages is really bad. Sign languages, no problem. Spoken languages, not good. Not sure how this mosquito net works. Doesn't seem big enough for the bed. Mosquito nets. Okay, the next day, Monday the 5th of November 2007, in-country training. Well, first morning here, just had a shower. Hot water is an interesting concept. I have it, but that's all I have. Only the hot water on the shower works, fluctuating between scalding and okay. When I can't stand under it, I put the bucket, which is provided, under there to collect the water and use it to wash my clothes in. On another eco-energy saving point, plastic bags are banned here, which is great, and all soft drinks come in glass, reusable bottles. That's interesting because plastic bags are still banned, but now you can go into any shop in Kigali and buy single-use drinking bottles, plastic bottles. So we lost the war against plastic bottles. But, you know, you still buy a lot of things like Fanta and Coke. You can still buy in glass bottles. We'll get onto that later. I went to bed at 8:30 last night, Sparko. Slept until my alarm went at 6. Yikes, my alarm went off at 6 in the morning. Ouch. Breakfast at 7. Did have a small pang of, oh my God, what have I done? But sure, it will pass. I like sleeping under a mosquito net. There's something comfortable about them, like a giant tent. Yeah, I've always liked mosquito nets, actually, because, again, in the UK, you don't have mosquito nets because we don't really have mosquitoes. I mean, you might get 1 or 2 in your room over summer, but they're really, really rare and they don't carry any harmful diseases. So you don't have mosquito nets in the UK, but in Africa, 100% you need one of those. Touch wood, haven't seen a mosquito yet. Few tiny black moth-like things, though, harmless. Sometimes you get they look like tiny little moths, like about the size of my little fingernail. I forgot what they've called. They've got a name. I'll find it. But they breed in your sink, in the plug in your sink. And sometimes if your sink is backed up and you get water rising in your sink, you'll see these tiny, tiny little black worms, like sort of wiggling around in the drain water. Those are the larvae of the tiny little black moths. They're actually very cute little black moths. They are very cute. They kind of skate across the top of water. Anyway, it took me many, many years to find out what those were. Birds are singing this morning. It's the short rainy season, so a few sudden downpours. A bit later on. Wow, what a long and interesting first day. Strange being the odd one out, not knowing anyone, but just the way it is. Lot of discussion about people's first couple of months in placement. Lot of positives, few negatives, which helps prepare me. Yeah, because I was joining a group of people who had already been there for a couple of months. So I got to hear all of their experiences and learn from that without having to live it yet. Felt much more part of the group today. I was very tired last night and it was a big reunion do for them. So yeah, you know what it's like when everybody knows each other and they're all getting together and it's like, oh, I haven't seen you in ages. Hugs, catch up, you know, but you don't know anybody. It was that situation, but it was fine. I appear to be the only 2-year placement. All the others are 1 year and mostly youth for development workers. Weird. Still, I know Bruce is coming out in January. Yeah. So, in my final pre-departure training at Harborne Hall, there was a photograph of all of these volunteers. And in my head, I remember myself as being the only person coming to Rwanda. And in this picture, there's a guy who looks just like the Bruce who came to Rwanda. But I didn't write anything about having met somebody else who's coming to Rwanda. So I'm looking at this guy, but it looks like Bruce. But is it Bruce? I don't remember Bruce being at Harborne Hall, but that was Bruce. And at some point in the past, he must have told me that he was coming to Rwanda, because I clearly realised that he's coming to Rwanda. So I did know one person who was going to be arriving the following year. Hi guys, editing me jumping back in here. I just remembered that Bruce also kept a blog during his time in Rwanda, and when I went to check it out, it's still there. I'll leave the link below. But in it, he's got the exact same training photograph, and he also said, at last I've met another volunteer who'll be in Rwanda with me. So we were definitely on the same training course. I just don't remember having that conversation with him. And it's really nice that he included the information that I didn't, because it really was a very rare placement to be going to Rwanda. It was a small programme office and there weren't very many of us. Well, I'm glad that we sorted that bloody mystery out. That was really, that did my head in. There's also another signer here. So when I say signer, I mean another sign language person. There's also another signer here, not on this training course, but working in the south of Rwanda. So VSO were going to pay for me to go and visit her. She's just extended for her 3rd year, so I was really looking forward to meeting her. One of the other volunteers said she met my future colleague at the employee training they hold. He was really happy to have me and looking forward to working with me, which was really heartening to hear, as some people have said that they haven't felt particularly wanted or welcome in their placements. The fact that he turned up to the employee training at all is apparently a sign of commitment. So yeah, I had no idea who I was going to work for. I knew that I was going to go and work with the Rwandan Union of the Deaf, but I didn't know who that would be, who those people who were working there were. And yeah, so yeah, some volunteers just felt like, you know, they weren't really very welcomed or involved by their employer. So yeah, the fact that my employer had turned up at the preparing to receive a volunteer training and that they were excited to have me turning up was apparently a really good sign. Yeah, I mean, that's what you want to hear, isn't it? When you've just flown like all the way across the world to kind of volunteer somewhere, you kind of want to hear that you are expected and that you are wanted. After all of that would have been a bit of a disappointment if not. Today began with a 2-hour Kinyarwanda session. I loved it, and apparently I'm doing really well for just having started. After we finished, I received a Rwandan SIM card for my mobile phone, but still working it out. All the helplines are in French, so need to find someone tomorrow, which shouldn't be a problem. Loads of French speakers are here. And that was the wonderful thing, you know, there were so many volunteers from all over the world. If you had a problem, somebody knew what the solution was because they'd all been through it before. So, you know, that was really helpful for me. There were some advantages, despite feeling a little bit out of the loop. There were definite advantages to coming later. I also got some Rwandan francs as an advancement on my pay so that I could go to the pub with everyone. My first trip outside the gates. So although we were volunteering, we got a stipend each month. So our housing was paid for. And we had a living allowance, monthly living allowance, but because I hadn't been there for a month yet, I wasn't receiving anything. I didn't have any Rwandan francs on me. I'd just come straight from the airport. And back then, there were no ATMs in the country, so I couldn't just whip out my card and take out some francs. That wasn't a possibility. And you couldn't buy francs outside of Rwanda, so I couldn't bring any with me. So yeah, they were very, very kind. They did look after you very well at VSO, and they just gave me some money so that I could go out with everybody and have a drink. So the guest house was here, and there was a mud road, and like about 3 doors up there was a local bar next to the guest house, and that's where we all just went to, and it was a proper local bar. It was, you know, all of these little round huts with thatched roofs, no lighting really, very, very low level lighting. But, you know, I mean, God, it was exciting, you know, going down the local bar in the middle of Africa. It was like, it was fun with people I barely knew. It was like, okay, let's do this. So it was fantastic. Dark here by 6 p.m. every night, but Mediterranean warm. Yeah, something again nobody prepared me for is, you know, in the UK, our daylight hours fluctuate so much throughout the year because we're quite far north. So in the summer, it doesn't get dark until about 10 o'clock at night. But in winter, it gets dark at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So like huge fluctuations of daylight. Whereas here on the equator, it gets light at 6 a.m. and dark at 6 p.m. 365 days of the year. You know, there really isn't any fluctuation. And that's something I just hadn't really been prepared for. I never thought about that. You know, it's like the same daylight hours all the way through the year. But like I said, it was kind of Mediterranean warm. And I used to go on holidays with my dad a lot as a kid. So it was kind of a nice feeling. You know, it's dark at 6 p.m, but all the lights are on and the bars are open. It's nice and warm. It's kind of like, it's got that vibe. So, lovely little pub up the road. Brackets, the red dirt road. Yeah, the earth here is very, very red. It's like a large shack with huts outside to sit in. Had another power cut halfway through, which seems to be normal. Everyone toasted my arrival, which was lovely. Yeah, they did make me feel really welcome, really welcome. So, no street lights either, so it's fun stumbling home. I should have said it's fun stumbling home drunk in the dark. Yeah, we were all kind of holding on to each other. We did drink, we drank, we did. So we had dinner after that. The food here is amazing, seriously nice. And almost everybody says that when they first come to Rwanda, because traditional Rwandan food is called a mélange, and it's a buffet, carb heavy. I've showed you this in other videos. There's usually pasta, chips, rice, potatoes, probably yams or cassava, very starchy, very carb heavy. Then there's usually peas or greens, and then either goat, beef or fish with some sauce. And yeah, you just choose what you want to eat and you build up this plate of food. And avocados as well. We did great avocados here. So yeah, it's a really, really nice meal. And you can happily eat that for quite a long time before getting a bit kind of, oh, you know, I need something else. But the food was really good. Yeah, a lot of people do say that when they first come here. The melange is like, oh, this is really good. Oh, red beans as well. There's always some kidney beans in there. It's 9:30 p.m. and I'm just relaxing, then going to do a bit of hand washing and bed. Excellent first day. So yeah, I was washing all of my clothes in the sink at the time. So yeah, I have arrived in Rwanda. I have made it to in-country training. And yeah, I think we'll leave it there for today. That was quite a gentle easing into Rwanda. But yeah, I mean, it was a world apart from where I'd just come from. I just come from kind of, yeah, rural back streets of England and old abbeys and like forests and English weather, cold English weather. And yeah, I've just arrived in a very different place. Despite that initial kind of obviously not fitting in, because I hadn't known anybody before I got there, they made it really easy. And you know, you get to know anybody when you go for a drink. So we went for a drink, and at that point you know everybody, and they really did make me feel really welcome. And Amanda as well. Amanda was just, she had a real natural ability just to make you feel included, and you know, a good sense of humor as well. So you didn't feel like you had to be terribly serious all of the time. You know, it was like, yeah, you know, it was a weird experience, but I felt really welcomed by that point. You know, within a day of being there, it's like, yeah, this is fun, this is my life now. So yeah, okay. But yeah, still, again, Zara, wherever Zara's in the world, she made my flight bearable. A lot better. So yeah, be a Zara. If you're ever sitting in a plane next to somebody who's sniffling a little bit and looking a little bit uncertain of themselves, just have a chat to them, you know, because I think especially long distance flights, you don't know where people are coming from, what they're going to, you know. It can be a lonely experience. Even if you're prepared for it, it can be a bit of a scary experience. But yeah. All right. See you in the next one.